Good evening. So nice to have you here tonight. I'm Sally Schnitzer. I live at 1155 Lowell Road, and I'm co-chair of the Esterbrook Woods Access Study Committee. And I want to thank you very much for taking the time to join us tonight. Tonight's public hearing is being recorded by CCTV, just so you all know. And it is being broadcast. Wait a second. Okay, take your time. We'll wait. All set? Okay, we'll try again. Tonight's public hearing is being recorded by CCTV, and it's also being broadcast live this evening. It will be available for rebroadcast in the future, and I understand from from Kester tonight that it's also available on demand. If you go to Concord Government Meetings, you can click on it and watch it at any time, in case you want to see it a second time. The Esterbrook Woods Study Committee was created by a vote of the Concord Select Board on March 14th of 2016 in response to an increase in complaints filed with the Concord Police Department and the Select Board regarding parking on Esterbrook Road, conflicts between homeowners and visitors to the woods, conflicts among visitors, especially those involving dogs, and other related issues. Also, in response to these conflicts, the Select Board this spring put temporary parking limitations into effect on Esterbrook Road. These limitations will remain in effect until the fall, allowing our committee to make recommendations about how best to address parking and visitor accommodations in this location and elsewhere. There are 9 Concord residents on our committee, each of whom was appointed by the Selectmen in April. Our committee was constituted to include a number of specific stakeholders, including abutters to access points in the woods, representatives of the Natural Resources Commission, the Conservation Restriction Committee, the Concord Land Trust, the Town Trails Committee, and several at-large members who have demonstrated an interest in the woods. We also have a liaison appointed by the Selectmen of the Town of Carlisle, making our committee 10. We held an organizational meeting on April 26th to elect our chairs, and since then we've had 3 business meetings. In just under 2 months, we have made a good start on our work. We have set up a page on the town website listed under boards and committees where you can follow our committee's work now and in the future. You can find agendas, minutes, and various documents that will be made available. We have an email address where you can reach us. These addresses are available on the handout at the back of the room if you want to take it home with you. We have also reviewed our charge and read the correspondence received about this issue by the Select Board, and we're beginning to outline and conduct the research that we want to pursue. This is the start of our process, and one of the first things we wanted to do was hear more broadly from residents of the town. We are pleased to host this hearing tonight to listen to your suggestions, but we will also be happy to hear from you at any time during the next few months via email or letter. There are forms, as I mentioned, in the back of the room for putting, if you want to send an email or if you want to leave a comment with us this evening. Over the summer, we will do our best to evaluate your comments within the constraints of our charge. Our tour of duty as a committee is a short one. We're expected to submit draft recommendations to the Select Board by the fall. We'll hold a second public hearing at that time so that residents can comment on our draft recommendations. After hearing the public response, we will make any final changes to our report and hope to submit it to the Select Board by the end of October. The purpose of tonight's hearing is to listen to you, but in order to provide some context for the challenges of land management and public access in the Esterbrook Woods, we're just going to begin by sharing a bit of history of the woods and its land ownership and stewardship. I'd like to introduce my co-chair, Polly Reeve. Okay.
How does that sound? Can you hear me? Okay. Hi, I'm Polly Reeve, and I live at 429 Williams Road, and I'm co-chair of this Estabrook Woods Access Study Committee. I'm also a trustee of the Concord Land Conservation Trust. People have used and enjoyed Estabrook Woods for centuries, dating back to the Musketaquid Native Americans. Some of Concord's earliest colonial settlers lived in the woods, using the land for grazing and agriculture. Henry David Thoreau walked these woods frequently and wrote about it in his journal. In the latter half of the 20th century, land preservation efforts shaped the future of the woods. Today, Estabrook Woods is one of Concord's largest natural intact areas, with a large number of property owners. There are many definitions of what constitutes the Estabrook Woods, but for our purposes, we are focusing on the land in the northern part of Concord, between Lowell Road on the west, Barnes Hill on the south, Monument Street to the east, and extending north to the town border with Carlisle and beyond. We as a committee are cognizant that the woods extend into Carlisle and that the towns and land trusts of Concord and Carlisle have worked together to protect the woods and to deal with management issues. Our committee is continuing that tradition, and we're pleased to have Nick Darbeloff as our Carlisle designee. Residents of Carlisle may be here tonight, and we welcome you to this hearing. We know that the woods functions as a system and that issues or decisions in one part of the woods may have an impact elsewhere, including across town borders. The maps that we're showing here tonight represent our preliminary analysis of open and protected land in both Concord and Carlisle, but our comments are going to focus on the Concord part of Estabrook Woods, located south of the town line. While there is a perception among many that the Estabrook Woods is a publicly protected park, this is actually not accurate. Within the broad study area described on this map is a mosaic of privately owned developable land, privately owned research land, privately owned land with conservation protection, land trust land, and publicly owned conservation land. When a visitor walks through the woods, he or she might easily pass through several different ownerships. Both Concord and Carlisle have some town-owned conservation land in these woods, and they're outlined here in red and shown in green. In Concord, the largest such parcel is the 100-acre Punkatasset Conservation Land, most of which was acquired by the town in 1971, that was 92 acres, and 8 acres of which was acquired in 1990 along Sawmill Brook. This 100 acres is managed by the town's Department of Natural Resources. The other town-owned conservation land is a 13-acre parcel around the Monument Farm subdivision near the Concord-Carlisle line, which provide a buffer to land owned by Harvard. So the remainder of Concord's Estabrook Woods is in private ownership. The largest single landowner is Harvard University, shown here in this sort of purpley color, which established a 672-acre field station through the Museum of Comparative Zoology in the 1960s, of which approximately 612 acres is in Concord, with about 60 acres in neighboring Carlisle. The field station was established through the efforts of Professor Ernst Mayr and Dr. Lyman of Harvard, who saw the need for a biological preserve within easy access of Cambridge for research by Harvard faculty and students. The acquisition of the field station was made possible through an intensive, sustained fundraising effort that included a grant from the Ford Foundation, participation by the Nature Conservancy, the generosity of landowners, and private fundraising. Harvard's purpose, as stated in the fundraising literature, was, quote, for instruction and research within the scope of the educational purposes of the Museum of Comparative Zoology. The activities to be carried out at the field station and elsewhere in connection with its use will thus include research and field studies of all kinds related to zoology, such as ecological research and studies of populations, seasonal changes, and behavior, end quote. Harvard has explicitly permitted use for compatible recreation, so long as recreational use of the property remains modest and quiet, The university has permitted walking, jogging, skiing, and so on within its land area, except where research is being conducted. So another category of land in the Estabrook Woods is land trust property. Again, both the Concord and Carlisle land trusts have properties in the woods. In Concord, the Concord Land Conservation Trust owns several parcels totaling just under 100 acres, the largest of which is the 59-acre Chamberlain Woods property off of Lowell Road, over there. The CLCT properties are open to the public and may be used for passive recreation and education. So, the rest of the protected land in the Concord portion of the woods, more than 400 acres, is privately held by more than 20 separate landowners, including Middlesex School, who have agreed individually to put their land under what is known as a conservation restriction, or CR. A CR is a legal document by which a landowner conveys a partial interest in land to a qualified conservation organization or public entity. The land remains privately owned, but the landowner agrees to forego or limit future development and to protect particular conservation values of the property, such as wildlife habitat, scenic views, agricultural land, etc. A conservation organization such as a land trust or a public entity, like the town of Concord, assumes the responsibility of monitoring the property and enforcing the terms of the restriction. All CRs are approved by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and are recorded in the chain of title and bind present and future owners. Some of the CRs in Estabrook Woods date back to the 1970s, shortly after they were first established under state law. Others were created in the decades since. In the mid-1990s, there was a concerted effort to preserve land around the periphery of Harvard's holding in order to preserve its usefulness as a research area. Working together, the towns of Concord and Carlisle, their conservation commissions, land trusts, and the trustees of reservations acquired additional land and conservation restrictions. The interesting thing about CRs is that they're written individually for each property, and the terms can vary. With respect to public access, some of the CRs in Estabrook Woods permit public access on certain trails, and some do not permit public access at all. So finally, there is substantial acre within this study area that is developed or developable, including numerous homes, private and public ways, and privately held parcels without any permanently permitted public access. Some private landowners may give general or limited and specific permission for access across their property. So, what does all this mean? In Concord's Estabrook Woods, there are more than 1,400 acres of land with some sort of protective conservation status, but most of this protected land, more than 90%, is privately owned and voluntarily protected from development through conservation and/or deed restrictions. Rights to public access are not uniform. This fact has important implications for the question of public access and recreational use. For many years, Harvard, the towns of Concord and Carlisle, the land trusts of Concord and Carlisle, private owners, and thoughtful visitors have worked together to protect and enjoy this beautiful and important natural area. Stewardship of such a special place requires cooperation and respect among all of us, landowners, governments, and visitors. Thanks to the wisdom and foresight of many individuals and organizations, the woods are still here for us to explore and enjoy, and it is important to keep in mind the complexity of land ownership, illustrated by this colorful map, as we consider issues related to access of this precious and fragile local resource. Currently, there are only 3 highly used access points to the woods in Concord. These are at the entrance to the Punkatasset Conservation Land on Monument Street, here, the end of Estabrook Road, down at the bottom, and at the entrance to the Concord Land Conservation Trust land at Chamberlain Woods on Lowell Road, over there. Virtually all visitors to the woods use these entrances, and as a result, they are the pressure points where challenges are most keenly felt. They are also likely the places where solutions will have the most meaningful impact. So, our committee will be looking at parking, signage, visitor management, and access at these and possibly other locations. We will consider whether there are steps that might be taken immediately or over the longer term to more thoughtfully welcome visitors to the woods without negatively impacting the legitimate rights of landowners and while supporting the stewardship of the woods. And now back to Sally.
So the recent conflicts at the Estabrook Road entrance to the woods have already led to some very positive suggestions. There's been a lot of correspondence, and we've taken that in and are carefully considering it. We've sort of put these into 4 buckets for tonight for us to organize our thoughts and hopefully for you to do so. The first bucket deals with suggestions around parking, and here we're thinking about how much parking is appropriate for the woods as a whole and for each access point individually. Before we can answer this question, we also need to think about how much recreational use is right for the woods as a whole. How often is the currently available parking exceeded? What happens when it is? How can we provide safe access and egress for visitors and for landowners? Would changes in signage be helpful? How do changes at one parking location domino to affect other access points? Some suggestions we've received deal with possible improvements to parking areas, having resident parking stickers, or having better signage. The second bucket deals with communications. Do visitors to the Estabrook Woods sufficiently understand what the woods are all about? Would additional informational signage help? And if so, what kind? What impact is the internet having on the woods, and are the messages there accurate? Is there a need for any directional or trail junction signage or signage to denote property lines? The third bucket deals with visitor and visitor uses, regulations, and courtesies. In this bucket, we have a variety of topics such as dogs being on and off leash, owners picking up after dogs, conflicts between riders and dogs or bikes, conflicts between abutters or landowners who have granted permission for public access, trash, property damage, trespass, and other related issues. On the land trust and town properties, there are rules that have been established for visitor use, but on the remainder of the land, there have been common courtesies and habits that have been relied upon. Is there a need for something else? The final bucket deals with legal issues such as enforcement, regulations, and issues over access rights. Some of these issues are outside our charge, but are being reviewed by the town. As a committee, we recognize that the conflicts we faced in the last few months at the Estabrook Road trailhead are not unique. These same issues have arisen in many locations across the state and across the country, at beaches and parks and wild areas elsewhere. We'll be looking at what others have done to see what we can learn from them. And perhaps some of you have some suggestions based on those experiences that you'd like to share. So let me just close by giving you just a couple comments on the format from here. This is a public hearing, and we're here really to listen to you. I want to remind everyone again that who might have come in late, that the proceedings are being recorded live this evening on CCTV and will be rebroadcast. We ask you, therefore, to use the microphone, which I'm going to turn on in a moment, before you speak, and to please state your name and address so that we can keep track of your comments. In order to hear as many people as possible, we ask that you keep your remarks under 3 minutes. And we know that some of you may have experienced some unpleasant interactions in the woods. And as a committee, I just want to say up front that we're obviously not in a position to adjudicate an individual episode. What we really hope is that you'll draw from your experiences over years or months or weeks in the woods and make some observations, suggestions, and recommendations that will lead us to some positive resolutions. We are interested in solutions that welcome visitors to the woods without negatively impacting the legitimate rights of landowners and that support the stewardship of the woods. So at this time, I'd like to ask the committee to introduce themselves and give their name and address and their affiliation if they have one, just so you can see who we all are. Kathy, you want to start?
Stewart. I live at 321 Hayward Mill Road, and I represent the Concord Trails Committee.
Hi, I'm Neil Rasmussen from 393 Esbrook Road as an abutter and also as a landowner, since my wife and I love and care for 200 acres at the end of Esbrook Road, extending about half a mile toward Carlisle. I created and maintain the parking area that's used on Esbrook Road, and also my neighbors and I grant permission for the public to access the trail at the end of the road.
Hi, I'm Lisa Pohl. I live at 75 Laurel Street in Concord. I was appointed as a citizen at large on that committee.
And again, I'm Polly Reeve. I live at 429 Williams Road, and I'm a trustee of the Land Trust.
And I'm Sally Schnitzer, and I am an abutter to the Lowell Road access at Chamberlain Park. So I think I'm going to go turn on the microphone, and we can do this either by passing the microphone around to you or having you come to the mic. I'm going to just sort of see what you all start to do, and we'll follow accordingly. I would love to have a response. That would be lovely. And just again, if you could give us your name and street address.
Yes, I'm Russell Robb, along with my wife, Leslie. We live at 635 Monument Street, which abuts the Esbrook Woods. And a couple of suggestions about the parking. As you know, the entrance to Punkatasset is a dirt road that goes off to the left if you drive by the Bemis Farm. And I believe the town owns a small little office building of some sort about 100 yards in. And it seems to me they might own that piece of land that's right there. That could be turned in my opinion, to a dirt parking lot. That's one possibility. And the other is off Lowell Road where the Chamberlain entrance is. And possibly legally you could provide a parking lot, a dirt parking lot, small perhaps. And those are the two suggestions I have for parking.
Thank you very much.
I think I'll leave it.
Yeah.
I'm Abby White, and I don't want to talk too loudly. I'm at 851 Monument, and I think probably the only trailhead in Concord that you mentioned that isn't represented on the committee at this point. We uniquely moved to the 851 Monument property right around the same time that this was kicking up in September. So I recently wrote a letter that I sent via email, but I wanted to just read the letter because it's just gotten to the committee. So you'll have it in your inboxes after this meeting.
And as long as it's not longer than 3 minutes.
It's very
can,
short.
Okay.
It's 2 paragraphs.
Thank you very much.
I've already introduced myself. I've lived in Concord and enjoyed the open spaces it offers for the better part of 35 years. We moved back in September 2015 from the Snack Hill area to our current home on Monument Street. At the time of our move, the Estabrook Road entrance to the trails was popular, but not an unruly place for residents and non-residents to park. We were among the residents who accessed the woods through that entrance frequently to walk the trails. Sometimes we parked and sometimes we walked or biked to the trailhead. We were cautious and respectful of the abutting neighbors and their property. At this entrance, there was plenty of room to turn a car around without accessing any abutters' driveways or land. Vehicles at this site were driving under 10 miles per hour, as it is a dead-end road. We now have the good fortune of living alongside Monument Street, the Monument Street entrance to Estabrook, Punkatasset, where the 2 acres that is next to the parcel of town land that, both the easement that accesses Punkatasset, but also the parcel of land that George Robb just referred to that is town. Cars drive by the curvy stretch in front of our house at 30 to 40 miles per hour. Since the parking limitations began at Estabrook, the number of cars pulling into the trail, parking, and the frequency of quick turns into our driveway has increased significantly. At least 10, sometimes 30 times a day, we witness cars pulling into the town easement, often using our driveway to turn, to park along the road, or back out into traffic to return toward town. We have 3 school-aged children, and the driveway is their bus stop. We have witnessed cars backing into our neighbor's mailbox and driving away. Any of you that access that entrance, look at the mailbox and you'll see what I mean. We've witnessed, sorry, I lost my space. Cars pulling in at ram speed, facing in the wrong direction to snag a parking space, and road cyclists screaming, "Look out," as people open their car doors to get out on Monument Street. The parking along Monument Street is so dangerous that often people wait in our driveway, which we actually would prefer over someone getting hurt, while the driver pulls in to let them into the car. This temporary blocking of our driveway is not as big an issue as the overall safety of people accessing the trails, our family, and our neighbors. Many times, in order to pull out of our driveway, we have to nose into Monument Street to see beyond the cars parking on either side. As more and more cars create extended parking here, the sight lines to access Monument Street are reduced. This is truly an accident waiting to happen. We do not feel we, as owners of the abutting land, should carry the burden of this safety issue and parking impact for the entire town. Closing the Estabrook Road entrance has created an enormous unsafe situation at the Monument Street entrance. So we respectfully ask for some reduction of that parking or limitations, signage, something to help control the parking that's occurring on Monument. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just note that we have been receiving some letters on our webpage over the last week or so, and those letters will be passed along to the committee, and so we appreciate that you sent it and also that you were here tonight. Anyone else? Yeah?
Susanna Kay, 366 Estabrook Road. I just want to make one comment that Estabrook Road isn't actually closed. It's just restricted to what it's been for probably 20 years. It's been actually expanded, but it's not closed. Quick comment, I'm holding here the deed restriction, which will also speak to the comment that I actually agree with, that on the road, Lowell road parking, and Monument Street parking is incredibly dangerous. And the deed restriction for Punkatassett on page 5, section 5, subsection 4, explicitly states that a construction of a parking area is provided for, that contingency is provided for on the town conservation land to increase safety. So if the town is serious about using the town resource for town access, for increased safety, not just for the abutters, because I do agree with her, it's an incredibly unsafe situation. We have it all the time at Estabrook. They've actually backed up onto my dog. That there is a viable option that is owned right now by the town and has been owned by the town. And I'd like to submit this, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Can you give it to Polly? That'd be great. Thank you very much. If anybody wants the mic handed to them, you can just raise your hand. Well, okay, we'll just pass it on. All right, you're come around. Thanks.
Wayne Davis. I'm from Carlisle.
What was the last name?
Davis.
Davis, thank you.
Concord Street in Carlisle. I'm Vice President of the Carlisle Conservation Foundation and Carlisle Land Trust, and I'm also a longtime member of the Carlisle Conservation Restriction Advisory Committee, which is a town committee. First, let me thank the committee for welcoming Nick Darbaloff as a Carlisle representative on the committee, and also for inviting Carlisle residents to the hearing tonight. And then let me thank Mr. Rasmussen and any of the other neighbors and abutters in both Concord and Carlisle who have very generously opened up their lands in various ways to provide public access. I moved to Carlisle about 23 years and 2 weeks ago, and I think I have been a regular user of the Estabrook Woods in and out of all the entrances in both towns since about a week or two after I moved in. And I know that I speak for many other residents of Carlisle. We all treasure the woods, and we quite enjoy sharing this wonderful resource with Concord. The one request I would make of you, I am aware of the various safety and other issues and concerns that have been raised, and I realize that most of them need to be dealt with in the context of Concord. It is a shared resource, and I do hope that you'll work with Nick, and then as you move towards solutions in further coordination with the various public and private bodies in Carlisle, and Nick is familiar with all of them, to come up with solutions that also work on the Carlisle side. I know there's no intention here for Concord to export problems to Carlisle. I know you would never consciously do that, but I've been guilty of it myself, so I'm not going to accuse you of it. I've been guilty myself of trying to solve problems and inadvertently creating issues or problems for other people that I was less aware of. So I would urge your sensitivity there in coming up with solutions that work in both towns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It has been already so useful to have Nick on the committee, and we've actually had some representatives from Carlisle who've come to our meetings, so we do appreciate and hope we can build on that good cooperation. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Marcy Berkeley, 41 Monument Street in Concord. I certainly want to repeat again our huge gratitude, especially to the abutters who have worked often and made these entrances available to us. I do also want to underline the safety issues with funneling more and more cars to Lowell Road and Monument Street. As summer comes, there'll be more bikers, there'll be more families. The idea of a car door opening into a bike, sending the bicyclist into the traffic, a child possibly following a dog, leaping out of a car, these are horrific scenarios. So I hope that there'll be some decrease in the pressure on those 2 points, on Monument and Lowell, possibly even sooner than fall, whatever's possible. I also want to point out a more subtle public health hazard as we put more walkers and hikers into the entrances at Punkatasset and Chamberlain. Those trails are narrower and fuller of leaf litter, etc., than the trails from the Estabrook Road entrance. That means much higher risk of Lyme disease. Anyone who's seen me in the woods knows that I look a little silly because I have my socks up over, I have my gaiters. I really worry about Lyme disease, and there are a lot of people, kids, many others, who don't know as much, they don't take precautions, and having these people enter in large numbers on Lowell Road and Monument means much higher risk of Lyme disease, which often goes undetected, lifelong debilitating effects, really sad. So we do absolutely need to protect the rights of the abutters, and these rights have been trampled upon in some cases, but I also think there's a fairly urgent need to allow a little more access to the points that make the most sense.
Thank you. Can you just repeat your name again?
Marcy Berkeley, 41 Monument.
Hi, I'm Karen Kirsten, and we've rented homes in Concord for a number of years, and we're recently fortunate to be able to acquire a property at 280 Estabrook Road. My husband and I have run and walked in the woods for years, and we only recently discovered that there was an access point at Monument Farm Road. So my suggestion would be that we provide some signage about and safe parking areas to that area more visible so people know about it, and it can become a safe access point.
Thank you. Yes.
My name is Luis Bersberia. I live in 410 Lexington Road. I can tell you that I use...
Excuse me, can I just ask you to spell your last name?
Mr. King will spell
Okay,
it for
he's
you.
got it, okay.
I can tell you that I walked the first time in Estabrook Woods more than 30 years ago. So I'm not new to the issue, but for the past 7 years, I've been walking the Estabrook Woods basically almost daily. The Estabrook Woods are an essential resource for the people of Concord. And it's the unique combination of many interests that are all directed to the public benefit. The interests of Harvard University, of the town of Concord, of many other owners and trusts, and of course the neighbors that are abutters and that have some greater or lesser degree of control over the access to the woods. I want to remind this committee that their essential charge is to preserve that access, and that although there are a number of restrictions that may provide a venue by which those access may be modified, this should not be the purpose of the end result of this study or this engagement. I think that we are very, very lucky right now that the neighbors that are involved in the particular issue of the Estabrook Road access, which is really the only issue that it's being discussed, because nobody knew even that Chamberlain Woods existed or that Ponkatasan was so dangerous. And we must remind ourselves that what caused this problem was the outrageous and incredibly inappropriate behavior of people, not necessarily of cars or anything like that. And it was specifically in the entrance of Estabrook Woods. And if I was an abutter or a neighbor of Estabrook Woods, I would be absolutely outraged and would be raging with fury. But that doesn't mean that because of the circumstances, we can forego our essential responsibility of guaranteeing that the people of Concord can walk through the end of Estabrook Woods into the Estabrook Woods per se. The fact that we have very enlightened neighbors that have shown their absolute commitment to the maintenance and to the preservation of Estabrook Woods doesn't mean that in the future those neighbors are going to still be there. The problem that we have is that it's not going to be 10 or 20 or 30 years from now, but 50 years from now, if we don't guarantee on paper and through a legal document that it's absolutely foolproof, somebody is going to come and build McMansions or do something of that sort. So I trust and I hope that this committee will keep that mandate very much into account, and that with the cooperation of the neighbors, which are the first ones that are interested in this outcome, will come to a solution that assures that the people of Concord will have access to Estabrook Woods through the end of Estabrook Road. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
My name is Michael McAteer. I live at 1615 Lowell Road, right across the street from Estabrook Woods. And I spend a great deal of time in the woods. I won't tell you how much because you think I might be peculiar. But a couple of principles I would hope that we would practice is, one is that we not restrict the woods to not just whether you're a Concord citizen or a Carlisle citizen, but for others that come to visit our town, because I think we're an open community. That's one thing that I think is important. And I hope that the other principle is that we look at maintaining safe practices. We've seen and heard about accidents that can happen, and there's things that we can do about that by promoting safety. Also, stewardship of an extraordinary resource that we want to have for the next 500 years. And then to think about the behaviors that we've heard from a couple of other forums that really are pretty awful, and particularly as it relates to their animals and dogs and things like that. And there's things I think we can do to provide guidelines, and hopefully the few people that have exhibited that behavior don't affect the remaining that are, in fact, respectful of the woods. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah.
My name is Lisette Zinner. I'm at 31 Derby Street in West Concord. I've used the Punkatasset monument access for about 25 years, even though I've only lived in Concord half that time. So I would like to echo the last two speakers in saying that I've loved the access, the ability to access those woods, and friends know that I've referred to it as my church because I'm there very much, so very often. I don't know if you've been there recently, but I'm also responsible for placing the bench by the pond and maintaining the book that is going along. And it's very clear from that book how many people have treasured this spot over the years, and really it's become an important part, from all over the area. I appreciated the history and understanding the different restrictions. I'm not sure I followed them all, so I have a question. Is the Estabrook Road entrance restriction, does that stipulate that there should be access, public access? I'm wanting to understand that. And if so, does a lot there make more sense because of how slowly cars are going? Thank you.
It's a good question, and I'm going to take a quick answer to that, and then if we need further clarification, the town manager is here as well. But the neighbors and the town are reviewing the rights at that access point. You heard Mr. Rasmussen say at the beginning that they have asserted rights there, and the town is reviewing that, and I'm not casting a judgment on it, but the town is reviewing that at the moment. I don't know, Chris, if there's anything you want to add to that?
Town manager. I live in 1935 Main Street in Concord. And as you say, Sally, town council is reviewing it. The town abandoned the unpaved portion of Estabrook Road in 1932, and typically the public rights to use the road are abandoned at that time to the abutters. There's no publicly owned land in that general area. So it will take there's no documented rights of access. So whether the question of prescriptive rights, if the public has acquired rights over time, is being looked at.
I'm Candace Nelson, 321 Hayward Mill Road. I am wondering if either the committee or the police have determined how many parking spaces along Estabrook Road are available. I know that they're currently restricted to 9, but if you were to lift all restrictions, how many cars could park along that road? And suggest that we equalize the parking in all of the access points, because we've now learned that by restricting parking in one place, you increase pressure in the other places. So when you get to thinking about parking there long term, I would suggest that we think of a way to equalize parking available at all the access points.
So I think that, as we indicated earlier, we are at the beginning of our process, so I don't think we can answer that question tonight, but and I think that what it will require is a look by some of the town departments, Public Works, Police, and others, to come up with some figures, probably for all of the spaces, and so hopefully we'll be able to provide some information about that by the end of our process. All right, Mr. Robb, you go first, and then we'll take Mrs. Kay. Go ahead.
Chris Whalen, my name is Russ Robb from Monument Street. As Chris implied that we can't acquire a little bit of that land that is the entrance to Punkatasset Pond off Monument Street. Is that something that could be acquired enough for a dirt parking lot?
No, I was referring to Estabrook Road. I think the town owns the land referred to on conservation.
You commented on my suggestion that we use that as a parking spot.
It was just brought to my attention that what your earlier comment, that there is the opportunity to create parking there. I know the police chief has expressed some concern about having off-road parking in that location, which is a bit isolated, but it's something that the committee could recommend we look at.
Well, I mean, nothing's perfect. It's the best. It's a solution that we've heard a lot of. We haven't heard too many solutions tonight, put it that way.
Okay.
Well, I think we've definitely heard your suggestion, and we'll put it on our list to look at. So we appreciate that. And the deed restriction, we've now got a copy as well. So I think Mrs. Kay was for, okay, since you're the second time around, we'll take, thank you.
Eric Green, 52 Devon Street. I'd like to thank the committee for volunteering its time to tackle this problem. Thank you very much. I'm breaking a 6-year moratorium on speaking in public in Concord tonight. I've used the Estabrook Woods in many capacities, and when I'm on foot, the bicyclists kind of irritate me. And when I'm on a bicycle, the walkers irritate me. And when I'm skiing, the snowshoers irritate me because they miss the tracks. And when I'm riding my horse through there, the people walking with dogs kind of irritate me. And when I'm walking my dog through there, the horseback riders kind of irritate me. Okay? But the truth is, none of us made the Estabrook Woods. And the Estabrook Woods will be there long after we're all gone. And if we are fortunate to ski there, or snowshoe there, or walk there, or live next to it, we have a privilege that we should do everything possible to preserve and make available to everybody to use in reasonable ways that are non-disruptive. Sometimes particular users of the woods seem to claim a sense of entitlement to their particular enjoyment and use of the woods, which always kind of puzzles me. I think respect for everybody's use of the woods, the abutters who are temporarily living on Earth in that place, the skiers, the snowshoers, that's what we need. Last Sunday I was visiting with a couple who live in a beautiful location behind locked and armed gates. And as I heard their description of how beautiful the place was they lived, I thought to myself, how awful it would be to live inside that locked and gated, beautiful area. But how worse it would be to live outside that locked and gated area. I think we need to be very, very careful that we don't, in a small way, start creating locked-in, locked-out areas, especially with a treasure that I think everybody who's here at this hearing and everybody in our town loves. There are certain safety issues and abuse issues that need to be corrected. Those can be corrected quite easily. Why can't the speed limit on Monument Street over Punkatasset Hill be 10 miles an hour? We could do that in an instant, and it is a terrible safety hazard. We've gotten out of our cars with kids along there many times, and it's terrifying. And the neighbors who have to live there with cars coming in and coming out, that's a terrible burden to put on them. And the things that the Estabrook Woods abutters have been subjected to, many of them can be corrected easily and quickly. And we ought to do all of these things in a way that reduces impact and preserves access to all of us who enjoy the woods. And I hope the committee can come up with some positive solutions to do that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Susanna Kay, 366 Estabrook. In some ways, it sounds as though you guys are trying to recreate some of the solutions already found by the national parks, and unfortunately, those solutions do not always adhere to the joy of everybody having access to everything. You try and go and hike up Half Dome, you have to get a ticket. It's been overused. It's getting abused. This has come to a head because abutters have been abused. It's private in certain areas. It's a lovely resource, and there are a lot of people who believe it's a resource and would like to share it and have explicitly written permission for people to come on the land. Yes, we're on it temporarily. My taxes are not temporary. There is an ownership on a lot of it and a lot of the accesses. It would be lovely if the committee could explicitly create places such as Rusty Rob had commented that are safe parking off the street, either with a deed restriction or with the lot right off of the street that could be made into a beautiful dirt lot by Punkatasset. And it would be removing spaces from the street to increase the safety. Because again, I think if the committee could look at the use, the burden of use, both by the dogs, the amount of waste they bring in, as well as the foot traffic, that is negatively affecting the conservation land. And yes, it is a beautiful resource, but it was put in conservation by people who would like to preserve it as an outdoors resource, not just as a destination point. And a lot of the people who've put that money in and have taken those financial hits because they believe in the quality of having open land, it isn't just to be trampled on and pooped on by anything and everybody. It really is supposed to be preserved as an open space to be studied. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Anna Westwinter, 393 Estabrook Road. Just a quick clarification on the comments that Russ Robb made and to talk about the potential parking lot. Not that it's really hypothetical, because in the 80s it did exist. So there was a parking lot that accommodated people that were going into the town land. So there's a chance that that could be reestablished there. So it did exist, and I think it probably facilitated some very safe visitorship to the area. So, thank you.
Thank you. While we're waiting to see if there's another speaker, I just want to say I look out and I know that some of you that are here are some of the landowners who have given rights for people to cross your property, and some of you are here tonight. And I just want you to know the committee, I think it was evident in some of the comments that we made in our presentation, but on behalf of the community, we do thank you all for what you help provide for us and the permissions that you do give to all of us to cross the property, to cross onto your land, and also for the stewardship. You know, these trails are beautifully maintained in many places, and it doesn't all happen magically, so we do really thank you as a community.
Candace Nelson, 321 Hayward Mill Road. We really haven't spoken about any actions to be taken with respect to dog behavior or dog walkers' behavior. And as I understand and have heard from comments of abutters, this is a really big issue. And I'm not a dog owner, so I don't really know what to suggest, except for that it seems to me in Concord we have been successful in the past at initiating public dialogue around issues that are of public concern, and it would seem to me that that's something this committee might take on, or figure out a way for some body in town to take on some kind of public discussion campaign around dog etiquette, so that our public lands are safely available to everyone.
Thank you.
And by the way, I'm a skier. I only go into the woods in the winter, except for this year. I went into Bird and was really pleasantly surprised at the graciousness of the signs that have gone up around behavior, expectations, leashing, etc. So I'm assuming that Mr. Rasmussen, those are your signs, and they're just lovely. So thank you.
Hi, Penny Rade, 33 Pond View Lane. I have had the great fortune of walking in the Estabrook Woods for the last 36 years, probably twice a day, with my dogs. And I have to say that I had only 2 unfortunate incidents during that time. So I feel actually very fortunate. For me, it's the most fabulous place, magic place. I once had a friend come out whose father had just passed away, and he said, you know, the light in these woods are even better than church. I go every morning at 7 from the Estabrook entrance, and I'm fortunate enough that sometimes I'm the only one, or there are 2 or 3 other people. My big hope is that we will all still be allowed to go to these woods and enjoy them for the fabulous resource and beautiful area and the calm and peace that it gives me and I'm sure others in a world that's crazy. I appreciate all of you here tonight, you on the committee. It's wonderful to see so many people and so many people that I actually know. And I know that all of your heads will come together and probably come up with wonderful solutions. The parking, I'm wondering a question to the Estabrook Road, have the signs helped the situations that you've been dealing with for a long time? We lived on Estabrook Road for 22 years, and we had parking problem. It wasn't really a problem, but the street was full when the great skiing days were there, when the mushroom people came, and when the orienteering people came. So it wasn't every day. I know since we've left, other things have been going on, and it's been difficult. And I'm just wondering whether the parking signs have helped. I've only a few times, if I get there late on a weekend, have to go somewhere else. But parking lots, I think, are great. I think it's difficult because who's going to manage them, and you get things going on at night in them unless you close them off. And I think Lowell Road is a racetrack. Monument's difficult. Maybe you can get that parking lot off of Monument Street or possibly Lowell Road. That might help. It's just that brings other issues. Thank you for doing this. Please help us all still be able to go to these wonderful, wonderful woods with my dog off leash, I hope.
Thank you.
Marcy Berkeley, 41 Monument. I wanted to comment on major occasionally problematic users like the orienteers. I was a member and volunteer with the New England Orienteering Club, and the last meet made us realize there was a perfect storm, a lot of users. There will never be another New England Orienteering meet at Estabrook Woods. So some of the big group users have realized that does not work and will self-police because that's the kind of responsible work they do. I don't know how to get other major users to realize, but obviously some way to reach out to potentially major users and say, doesn't work anymore would be very useful. Just a suggestion. Following the idea of emulating the national parks, many national parks have friends groups, and a friends group for Estabrook Woods may help us provide the responsible stewardship it needs, because it could be a mechanism to raise money which can help deal with many of these problems. Time, effort. There's a lot of love in this room and otherwise for these woods. Many of us would be happy to volunteer our time, effort, energy, intelligence to help steward the woods better. So let's create a mechanism so we can volunteer and really, truly help, so all the burden isn't on the abutters.
Right. Thank you. Eric.
Eric Green. 52 Devon Street. Having gone from the general now to the specific, seems to be everybody talking about parking lots. I'm not sure at all that we want parking lots new parking lots at any of these entrances. Parking lots attract more cars. And why do we want more cars? Maybe we need some spots for handicapped access, elderly people, but the rest of us, if we're going to walk in Estabrook Woods, why don't we walk to Estabrook Woods or ride our bikes there if we are able-bodied? Why do we want more cars driving through town to these places? So before we do that, and it's unsightly, so before we rush to more parking lots on Monument Street at Punkatassett or along Lowell Road, I think we have to really think that through. I'm not sure that's the solution, actually.
I didn't realize we get to go twice, so that's pretty cool. So,
just give me your name again. Just
Abby
so
White,
Abby. Yeah, Abby, thank you.
851 Monument. Yeah. So I just want to echo what was just noted, and 2 quick points. One, spreading out the use really seems to make a lot of sense. I'm in the woods every day at least once with my kids, my dog, myself alone. It is definitely for me, a church-like place to go, and I enjoy being in there alone as well as with other people and furry friends. So anyway, I think spreading it out is key to making it accessible to everyone, but also keeping it the woods that we all know and love and can take a break from the busy world in. The other point I wanted to make that's unique to our frontage on Monument Street is that there is a very sharp turn there, and it happens to apex right where the easement comes out. So should there be a parking lot put there, that means entering Monument Street at the most dangerous place I could think of. And we do it every day, and I wouldn't recommend that being an access point for more cars.
Thank you.
I'm Bob Cusick. I live at 119 Ministerial Drive. I was inspired by your comment about bicycles and wondered if the committee would consider these bicycles which you see around the urban areas where you can pick it up in one place and leave it off at another.
Yeah.
The 2 terminus that I was thinking of was the National Park, the Buttricks Mansion parking lot area, and the end of the Estabrook Road. So it would enable people to pick up a bike, ride it in, do their walking, ride it back, and leave it.
Interesting. Thank you.
Bob Schulman, 680 Main Street.
I'm sorry, catch the last name?
Last name Schulman.
Thank you.
Thank you. So a few things, no particular order. First of all, last few times I've gone to Estabrook, there's been a police car up there. I can't say that that's a particularly welcoming sign. I don't really like that, and so a number of times when I think about where I'm going to go with my 2 dogs from where I live, which is more than just a quick walk to Estabrook Woods, it's actually as convenient for me to go to Mount Misery over in Lincoln as it is for me to go up to Estabrook. And Mount Misery is actually a really pleasant place to go. It does have a parking lot. So in terms of the spillover, which we were talking about before, to Carlisle, I'm part of the spillover problem. To Lincoln, who's not represented here, which is probably why I spill over there, I guess. So that's one point. Another is that I'm wondering, you had your 4 buckets up there on the slides. It seems like we haven't really been covering them very well. You mentioned on one of the buckets there was a horse issue, and I'm wondering just what that might be.
I'm sorry, I don't think I can get our buckets out, but I'm sorry, your question is?
You mentioned a horse issue, and I was just wondering what that is, because it's not been mentioned here at all.
There have been some conflicts between horses and dogs, and, I think it was stated earlier by Mr. Green, sometimes when you're on a horse, the dogs are the problems, so without getting into the details, those kinds of conflicts.
Right, okay, so I used to live on the West Coast. I used to have horses on my property. I abutted an 880-acre park that was horse-friendly. And I really don't want to revisit that issue. Again, the park there had horrible horse-bicycle conflict that was just awful. So I'm hoping we can say that when you mentioned that, that just brought back nightmares. Right. The other thing is, I as much as I'd like the idea of easy access to Estabrook being on bicycles or walking, I don't think that idea really makes a lot of sense. A lot of people walk their dogs up at Estabrook, and getting the dogs up there in an easy fashion is not easy when you're on a bicycle. And it would sort of destroy a lot of the users of Estabrook, or destroy the ease of use for those users. I noticed that a lot of the people who abut Estabrook, or one of the entrances, really like that idea for obvious reasons, but the rest of us are not so keen on that. So hope you keep that in mind. Yeah, that was it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You certainly have given us, we've got a couple more. Let me take the fellow here with the blue shirt, and then we'll go over there. Yes, sir.
Hi. Jeff Parker, 1537 Sudbury Road, Concord. I've been involved in a lot of access issues in my life. And access is very expensive. If we gave this access up, it would cost a fortune for Concord to buy it. These properties are burdened with this access when they bought their property. Why would you give it away? Why would you limit it? I think it makes no sense at all. That's all.
Thank you. And yes, come on.
Wayne Davis, 739 Concord Street in Carlisle. The previous speaker's comment about paying attention to the other buckets, I think was a good one. And the communication education aspect hasn't been mentioned too much here, but I would certainly encourage the committee to take a very close look at it. As someone who is very intimately knowledgeable about CRs and the entire web of protection around Estabrook Woods, it is very clear to me that most people, including most residents of Concord and Carlisle who ought to know better than people from further away, have no idea of what it really means about that there is public access. But how is that different from a publicly owned park? We've got Walden Pond, which, by the way, has lots of restrictions on it that people are used to. Restricted access, try Saturday afternoon at 2 p.m. on a nice summer weekend. And I think that having kiosks or some form of not just rules, but some background about how it is through the generosity of private landowners that people enjoy access. But at the same time, the people who granted these licenses, conservation restrictions, easements, and so forth, they were not doing so under the assumption that they were creating a state park. That is a very different animal. And while I think we all really do cherish openness, openness does not mean, it cannot mean complete unfettered access, because complete unfettered access would ruin the very environment that it is supposed to protect. And this is just a very subtle message that I think we can't expect people to know unless we help them to know. So thinking about kiosks and other forms of communication that can be right there at the entrances, I think will be very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Judy.
My name is Judy Hadley, and I live at 32 Hugh Cargill Road.
and I have been riding a horse in the Estabrook Woods, as we are all referring to it here, since about 1974. And I want to say that I can probably count on my two hands the number of times in all those years that I have had a problem with a dog. I will say that by and large, I think that most dog owners who use the woods, and mainly they're on the Estabrook Road trail and they're on the trail that goes to your property and around, I think that they're fairly conscientious with regard to horses. And if you're on a horse, you look kind of intimidating to people on foot and to dogs, so that's also an asset. But since the restrictions have gone in for parking, and I haven't really had a chance to read the signs closely because I'm somewhat at a distance, I find people are even more cautious about safety for their dogs, because they don't know what a horse will do, and for the horse and me, the rider. So I think that what you have achieved at this point has actually been beneficial. Thank you.
Lynn Lemare, 864 West Street in Carlisle. I'm on the Conservation Restriction Advisory Committee with Wayne. And I think a couple of the important points that have come up here is the real difference between Estabrook Woods and a state park, not just the mosaic of land, but what it's used for. And I think that's important to understand because I don't think anybody really understands that. I mean, you all do, I suppose, but I'm still not quite sure what that means. The second thing is in terms of advertising this, I'm sure there's going to be a website, there's going to be parking spots and, you know, things that are there for people to come. That uses should be red letter, that it's for study and research and wildlife habitat, and that it's not Great Brooks and it's not the Cranberry Bog. That, you know, that it. If you emphasize the research aspects, the field station aspects, instead of the trails in the church, it may serve to have people have more respect to begin with and maybe go someplace else if they want to do something that's more, I don't know, chaotic. Anyway, thank you. And by the way, this is an extremely well-run committee. I want to thank you all for not only volunteering, but it just feels exceptionally open and thorough and effective. So thank you.
Thank you. And Lynn is someone who has come to our working meetings and has helped us understand the picture from the Carlisle side of the line. It's been very helpful to have you there. Anna.
Yeah, again, Anna Westwinter, 393 Estabrook Road. And just to answer Penny's question about that, absolutely. First and foremost, thank you. The committee's been terrific. The police have been incredibly helpful. And yes, indeed, the signage and the restrictions that have been put in place have really worked out quite well. We have 11 parking spaces that we have created. And right now, when we look at the road, usually there's plenty of open spaces for people to accommodate visitors. So we're happy to see that. And we do really feel that given some signage, people really get some direction that helps them out as to understanding you know, some of the restrictions that are really going to improve the visitorship and the safety in the area. So I think that people are more cognizant of how they deal with dogs and with oncoming horses. So I think people, you know, just need a little bit more guidance. And again, the suggestions about potentially using some signage at all of the different access points and working out some collaboration between the landowners, between those areas and what signs they put up would be really, really helpful. So yes, indeed, it's helped significantly.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to add a quick point about what the real problem is and how it is not solved by parking. My own random observations, which are quite continuous but very random, implicate that the number of poop bags left behind by dog owners in the access road to Estabrook has increased exponentially since the time that the parking restrictions were implemented. So that's just to illustrate that we have a people's problem, not a parking problem, and that we're not solving the problem of the people by fixing the parking. And there's no question that, you know, the parking has never been a problem for me because I can walk.
Thank you. I'm not going to close it off, but I just want to talk for a second and just remind people that if on your way home a brilliant idea hits you, or you're thinking about this over the next few days, or you're sitting at home and watching this on TV, and you have a thought or a suggestion, please do send us an email. You can find our webpage if you go to the Town of Concord webpage and click under Boards and Committees, and then under that it's an alphabetical listing, and you can find Estabrook Woods Committee, and our agendas and our minutes are up there, and there's also a click that you can click onto our email address to send us a message. So if you have further thoughts when you get home, you know, please feel free to pass those along to us. We've been getting a lot out of reading people's thoughts about this over the last few months and all that you've communicated. So we appreciate that. Yes.
I just wanted to say we're scheduled to have one more public meeting like this in October, but we do meet every other week. Unfortunately, it's at 7 a.m. over at 141 Class Road. But there will be, those are open to the public, and they have a public comments section at the end of every one of those meetings. So there are 8 or 10 more opportunities to speak about this before October, and I just encourage people to use that, because by the time we get to October, many of the ideas may be close to being formulated. It would be a shame to not participate and come to the end of the process and be upset, because there's plenty of public participation.
We meet Thursday mornings at 7 a.m. at 141 Kais Road, every other. So the meetings are posted, and you can see them on our webpage, I believe, the postings. The agenda goes up a few days in advance. Are there any further comments? We really, really do appreciate that so many of you came out this evening to hear our presentation, to give us your feedback. And I won't speak yet for the committee because I know we're going to take all of this and think about it, but I'm just struck at our first meeting, we went around the table, and the thing that we all said around the table was how much each one of us loved the Estabrook Woods from whatever experience we had. And I sort of feel like that's been the message that you've all been giving us too tonight, that each one of you from your perspective love the woods and are trying to find a way to find a good solution to the problems that we've had, and to preserve the woods in the future. So I think we're all, I have a lot of common ground. So if there's no further hand going up, I think we could declare our public hearing over, and thank you very much.